I gave my son my entire savings for his dream wedding, only for him to ask me to leave the reception. I thought that was the worst of it until the bills started arriving in my name. Then I found the bank statements. He wasn't just spending my future, he was profiting from it. This is the story of how I stopped being his mother and started being my own salvation. If you're watching this, hit the like button and subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. My name is Ellen Miller. I'm 58 years old, and until yesterday, I would have told you my life was built on two things, my work and my son. I'm a respiratory therapist, have been for 35 years. I work at County General in the city. It's an hour's commute each way from the house I still live in, the one my husband, Michael, and I bought a year after we got married. A small, brick-faced ranch on a quiet street with a big backyard that used to hold a swing set. It's too much house for one person. Everyone says so. But it's filled with him, with both of them. Michael died when Dominic was 12. A sudden, massive heart attack on a Tuesday evening. He was bringing in the groceries, just fell. One minute he was laughing about the price of oranges. The next, he was gone on the linoleum floor. After that, it was just me and Dominic. My family was gone. Michael's family was far away. It was us against the world. I worked double shifts whenever I could. The hospital was my second home. I missed school plays and some baseball games, but I was always there for the big stuff. Graduations, birthdays, the first time he got his heart broken. We talked every night, even if it was just for 5 minutes before I fell into bed exhausted. I wanted him to have everything I couldn't give him, everything Michael would have wanted him to have. So I saved. Every bonus, every tax return, it went into an account for him, for his future, for college, for a down payment on a house, for his wedding. It wasn't a fortune, but it was something, a mother's love turned into dollars and cents. Dominic was a good boy, sweet, thoughtful. He'd make me breakfast in bed on Mother's Day, burnt toast and all. He'd call me from college, not just for money, but to tell me about his classes. He met Bridget during his senior year. She was in his business marketing program, ambitious, sharp, from a family that lived in one of those new developments with the big stone gates. The first time he brought her home, I saw the way her eyes moved through our house, not unkindly, just assessing, like she was calculating square footage. She was polite, called me Mrs. Miller. We made awkward conversation over meatloaf. I saw how he looked at her, like she hung the moon. He was so in love, and I wanted him to be happy, so I smiled. I welcomed her. When they moved in together after graduation, I helped them pack. When they talked about getting married, I cried happy tears. The engagement was a whirlwind. Bridget had very specific ideas. The wedding would be at the Sterling family's country club, 200 guests, a designer dress, a 5-tier cake. It was a world away from my simple church wedding to Michael. Dominic seemed dazed by it all, but happy. "Whatever makes Bridget happy, Mom," he'd say with a shrug. Then came the conversation, a few months before the wedding. We were having lunch, just the two of them and me. Bridget had a notebook. "So, Ellen," she said, she'd started calling me Ellen, "we're finalizing the budget. As parents of the groom, traditionally there are certain things you'd contribute to." I nodded. "Of course, just tell me what you need." She slid a piece of paper across the table, a list. The rehearsal dinner, the bar tab, the flowers for the ceremony. A number was penciled at the bottom. It was more than I made in 3 months. I must have gone pale. Dominic reached over, his hand on mine. "Mom, it's okay. We don't expect all of it. Just what you can." Bridget's smile was tight. "We've already had to scale back some of our vision. My parents are covering the venue and the band, which is significant." I heard the unspoken words. "My family's doing their part, now you do yours." I looked at Dominic. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was studying his napkin. "I have some savings," I said quietly. It was for your future. I can give you that." Bridget's smile became real. "That would be wonderful, Ellen. Thank you for being so supportive." That night, I transferred the entire balance of Dominic's future account, $15,000, into his checking account. The email confirmation felt like a goodbye. The money was gone, but my son was getting married. that was what mattered. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, I tried to be helpful. I offered to address envelopes. Bridget said they had a calligrapher. I asked about the menu. She said it was already handled by the club's chef. I mentioned that Michael's mother had a lace veil I'd kept just in case. She said her veil was being custom made in New York. Every offer was gently, firmly deflected. I started to feel like a spectator, a guest who'd brought an expensive ticket. I told myself it was normal. This was Bridget's day. I just had to show up and be happy. But a small, quiet voice inside me began to whisper. It started the day I saw the guest list. Bridget had sent a draft. My side had 5 names: me, my elderly aunt, 2 cousins I hadn't seen in years, and a colleague from work. That was it. Michael's family was all gone. My friends. I realized most of my friends were hospital people, shift workers. I hadn't made time for anyone else. The list looked so small next to Bridget's side, which took up 2 columns. The voice whispered, "You've built your life on a pillar of sand, and the tide is coming in." I ignored it. I bought a new dress. I got my hair done. I practiced my smile in the mirror. I was going to be the mother of the groom. I was going to be gracious. I was going to love my new daughter-in-law. That was the plan, anyway. That was the person I was, right up until the moment my son looked at me in that glittering reception hall, surrounded by the smell of champagne and gardenias, and asked me to leave. The ceremony was beautiful, I'll give them that. Bridget looked like something from a magazine. Dominic, in his tuxedo, looked so much like Michael my breath caught. I cried, of course, silent tears that I dabbed away with the lace handkerchief that had been my mother's. I followed the script. I sat where I was told. I smiled for the photographs, positioned just so at the edge of the family grouping. Bridget's parents were front and center. Her father, a tall man with a perfectly silvered beard, clapped Dominic on the shoulder like he was approving a business deal. Her mother, in head-to-toe taupe silk, air-kissed my cheek. "We're so happy to welcome Dominic to the family," she said, her eyes already scanning the room for someone more important. The reception was in the country club's grand ballroom. Crystal chandeliers, a band playing soft jazz, waiters circulating with silver trays. I found a quiet spot near a potted fern, holding a glass of champagne I didn't want. I watched Dominic move through the crowd. He laughed at something a groomsman said, but the laugh didn't quite reach his eyes. He looked tense, like he was performing. I was about to go over to him to maybe steal him away for just 30 seconds to say, "I'm so proud of you," when I saw Bridget approach him. She whispered something in his ear, her hand on his arm. Her face was calm, but her grip on his sleeve looked tight. Dominic's smile faded. He nodded, then he looked across the room, directly at me, and he started walking. My heart did a little foolish leap. He was coming to talk to me, to include me. I set my champagne glass down on a passing waiter's tray, my hands suddenly nervous. "Mom?" He stopped in front of me. He didn't hug me. He didn't smile. "Hi, honey. Isn't it a wonderful day?" I said, my voice too bright. "Yeah. Look, Mom." He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up, a childhood habit. "Bridget's upset." My stomach tightened. "Upset? Why? Is everything okay?" "It's just, she feels like you've been giving her looks all day." I blinked. "Looks? What kind of looks?" "I don't know. Judgment looks, like you disapprove." He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was looking at my shoulder, at the fern, anywhere but at my face. "Dominic, I don't disapprove. I'm happy for you. I've been nothing but happy." "She says you sighed during the mother-son song." They'd played What a Wonderful World, a song I'd sung to him as a lullaby. A wave of sadness for Michael, who should have been here to dance with me, had washed over me. I guess I had sighed. "I was thinking of your father, that's all." "Well, it made her feel like you were criticizing our song choice. And then you didn't eat the appetizer, the crab puffs." I felt dizzy. The room seemed to tilt. "I'm allergic to shellfish, Dominic, you know that." He flushed. "Right. Yeah, I forgot. But she thinks you're just being difficult, picking at things." The word hung in the air between us. Difficult. I was being difficult. By existing, by breathing, by having an allergy. "I'm sorry she feels that way," I said carefully, my throat tight. "I'll go find her and apologize." "No," he said too quickly. "No, that'll just make it worse. She needs some space from you right now, for the rest of the reception." The words didn't make sense at first. They were just sounds. Space. From you. Rest of the reception. "What are you saying?" I whispered. He finally looked at me. His eyes, Michael's eyes, were flat, resolved. "I'm saying it would be better if you left." The noise of the party, the laughter, the clinking glasses, the band seemed to fade into a distant tinny hum. All I could hear was the blood pounding in my ears. "You want me to leave. Your wedding." "It's not what I want, Mom. It's what Bridget needs. Today has to be perfect for her. Please, don't make a scene." A scene? As if my mere presence, my quiet standing by a fern, was a spectacle. I looked past him toward the head table. Bridget was watching us. She gave a small, sympathetic shrug. A queen granting a pardon she didn't really mean. 24 years, sleepless nights, countless meals, helping with homework, nursing fevers, teaching him to drive, listening to his dreams, transferring my life savings, all of it reduced to this moment where I was an obstacle to perfection, a problem to be removed. I looked at my son, my boy. I searched his face for any sign of the child who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms, for the young man who cried on my shoulder when he didn't get the internship. There was nothing there, just a stranger in a tuxedo waiting for me to obey. My legs felt numb, but they worked. I picked up my small beaded purse from the chair beside me. My hands didn't shake. I was amazed by that. "Okay," I said. My voice was calm, a nurse's voice, the voice you use when you have to deliver terrible news but can't fall apart yet. His shoulders slumped in relief. "Thanks, Mom. I'll call you tomorrow, okay? We'll talk." I just nodded. I turned and walked. I didn't look back. I walked past the dancing couples, past the cake that cost more than my monthly mortgage, past the happy, oblivious faces. The click of my heels on the marble floor was the only sound I could focus on. Click, 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 marking my exit. The cool night air hit me like a slap. I made it to my car, a sensible sedan, 10 years old. I got in. I sat there in the dark parking lot watching the glowing windows of the country club. Inside, my only child was celebrating the start of his new family, and I had been erased from the picture. The drive home was a 4-hour blur of highway lines and tears I finally let fall. I didn't remember any of it. I just remember walking into my dark, silent house and realizing the crushing truth. He had chosen her, and in doing so, he had unchosen me. The house didn't feel like a sanctuary anymore. It felt like a museum dedicated to a life that was over. I moved through the rooms in a daze for 2 days. I didn't answer the phone. I didn't change out of my sweatpants. I just existed. The silence was a physical presence, heavy and accusing. On the 3rd day, the doorbell rang. It was mid-morning. I peered through the front window and saw a delivery van pulling away. On the porch was a large, flat cardboard box. Elegant script on the label, Bridget Sterling Miller. My heart did a confused, painful thump. A gift? An apology? With trembling fingers, I brought the box inside and opened it. It wasn't a gift. It was a photo, a massive framed professional wedding photograph. Dominic and Bridget laughing, her veil trailing artistically in some photoshopped breeze. They looked stunning. It was the kind of photo meant to hang over a fireplace. There was no note, just the photo. I sank onto the couch, the heavy frame in my lap. Was this a peace offering? A way to include me? But it felt off. It felt like a flag being planted, like a declaration. This is what matters now. This is the family. I didn't know where to put it. The mantelpiece held a picture of Michael and me on our wedding day and one of Dominic as a gap-toothed 7-year-old. I couldn't replace those. I ended up leaning the new photo against the wall in the hallway, out of sight. It felt like hiding evidence. The phone call started that afternoon. Not from Dominic, from numbers I didn't recognize. Vendors. The first was from the florist. Mrs. Miller, I'm calling regarding the final balance for the Sterling Miller wedding floral arrangements. Your portion comes to $2,150. I was confused. My portion? I I contributed already to the couple. Our records show a split invoice, the woman said politely, impatiently. The bride's family handled ceremony flowers and centerpieces. The groom's family is responsible for the bouquets, boutonnieres, and the sweetheart table arrangement. The balance is overdue. My mouth went dry. I wasn't aware of this split. It's in the contract, co-signed by Dominic Miller. She read my son's name like it was just another line item. We need payment within 10 days or we'll have to proceed with collections. I hung up, my hand shaking. Before I could process it, the phone rang again. The bakery. A remaining balance of $875 for the groom's cake, a chocolate tier that I hadn't even known existed. Then the limousine company. $600 for the groom's family transport, a car that had picked up my aunt and cousins from their hotel, a car I never rode in. The calls kept coming, a relentless parade of bills for things I never agreed to, never been consulted about, things Dominic had apparently put in my name. The final call was from the country club's event coordinator. Her voice was icy. Mrs. Miller, we are still awaiting payment for the rehearsal dinner. As the host, you are responsible for the $5,400 total. The contract is quite clear. The rehearsal dinner, I whispered. I hadn't hosted a rehearsal dinner. I'd been at a rehearsal dinner, a lavish affair in a private room at the club. Bridget's father had made a toast. I'd assumed they were paying. Mr. Miller signed the contract specifying the groom's parents as hosts. Dominic, he'd signed my name to all of this. I felt like I was drowning. The walls of my small, tidy living room seemed to press in. The total was climbing toward $10,000. Money I didn't have. My savings were gone. My monthly budget was a precise, careful thing. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, a little aside for emergencies. There was no room for a 5-figure surprise. I had to call him. I had no choice. He answered on the second ring. "Mom, hey!" His voice was light, cheerful, as if the last time we'd spoken hadn't been in a ballroom where he'd exiled me. There was music and laughter in the background. A party. Their honeymoon must have been over. "Dominic," my voice cracked. "I'm getting calls, bills for the wedding." A brief pause. "Oh, right, yeah. Bridget's mom forwarded me some stuff. They need to be paid." "They're in my name," I said, the strain breaking through. "You signed contracts for me, for thousands of dollars. I didn't agree to any of this." "Mom, calm down." His tone shifted, becoming patient, condescending. "It's just how it's done. The groom's family covers certain things. We talked about this." "We talked about me giving you my savings. We did not talk about you committing me to debts I can't pay." He sighed, the long-suffering sigh of a man dealing with an unreasonable child. "Look, Mom, Bridget's parents covered like 80% of the wedding. The least we can do is handle these smaller items. It's about showing respect, showing we're invested." Smaller items. A month's salary for me. Invested. I'd invested my entire life. "I don't have the money, Dominic," I said, each word a stone in my throat. "Well, you'll have to figure it out," he said, and his voice lost his patience. "I can't have my in-laws thinking that we can't hold up our end. It's embarrassing. Bridget's embarrassed." There it was again. Bridget's feelings, the central organizing principle of the universe. "So my financial ruin is preferable to your wife's embarrassment?" The question came out quiet, deadly calm. "Don't be dramatic, Mom. You're not going to be ruined. You have the house. You could get a second mortgage or something." I stared at the wall. at the spot where the huge wedding photo was leaning, hidden. A second mortgage on the house Michael and I had bought with so much hope to pay for a party where I'd been thrown out. "Dominic," I said slowly, "do you have any idea what you're asking me to do?" "I'm asking you to be a team player," he snapped. "For once, just do this for me, without the guilt trip. I'll send you the rest of the invoices. Just take care of it, okay? We're really busy setting up the new apartment." He hung up. I sat there, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. A team player. The words echoed, hollow and cruel. I'd been on his team since the day he was born. I'd been the entire team. The emails arrived an hour later. PDFs of contracts I'd never seen. My name typed next to signature of responsible party. Dominic's familiar scrawl on the groom line. The numbers glared from the screen. $9,850.23. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with a stack of bills and my bank statement. The math was impossible. I could skip my retirement contribution for the year. I could cancel the barely adequate health insurance supplement I paid for. It wouldn't be enough. The next morning, I did what I'd always done when I was scared. I went to work. The hospital was a relief. Its problems were concrete. A failing lung, a crashing blood pressure, things you could fight, things with protocols. I lost myself in the rhythm of alarms and hushed voices and the gentle hiss of oxygen. My break came in the mid-afternoon. I was in the staff lounge pouring a cup of terrible coffee when two nurses from the postpartum unit came in chatting. So then my daughter-in-law says, "Well, if you want to see the baby more, you should pay for the new nursery furniture. It's only fair since you're the grandmother. Can you believe it?" "Oh, I believe it," the other nurse, an older woman named Clara, said with a weary laugh. "It's a new world. They see us as walking checkbooks. My son didn't call for 3 months until he needed a cosigner for a boat." They saw me and lowered their voices, offering sympathetic smiles. I realized my face must have given me away. The mask of professional competence had slipped. "Everything okay, Ellen?" Clara asked gently. I wanted to say no. I wanted to spill the whole terrible story, but the words stuck. I just shook my head and whispered, "Wedding bills." Clara's eyes softened with a deep, knowing sadness. She didn't press. She just patted my hand. "Oh, honey." That tiny kindness, that shared understanding of a specific modern grief almost broke me. I made it to a supply closet before the sobs came, harsh, silent things that shook my whole body. I cried for the money, for the betrayal, for the lonely, terrifying future that stretched before me. But most of all, I cried for the boy who used to think I could fix anything, the boy who was now a man who saw me as something to fix, or worse, as something to use. The pressure was a vice, tightening every day. The polite reminder calls from vendors became more frequent, less polite. I started avoiding my own home, the ringing phone. I took on extra shifts, trying to outrun the dread. I ate peanut butter sandwiches for dinner, calculating the cost per meal. I stopped turning on the heat, wearing sweaters indoors instead. One rainy Thursday, I came home to find an official-looking letter from a collections agency. Final notice. My credit, which I had kept pristine through Michael's death, through raising a child alone, was about to be shattered. I stood in my kitchen, the rain streaking the window, holding the letter. The physical reality of my life pressed in, the chipped Formica countertops Michael had installed, the fridge humming its old familiar tune, the quiet, profound emptiness. I had worked so hard to build this small, secure life, this anchor, and with a few signatures, my son was threatening to pull it all out under my feet. He wasn't just choosing a new family, he was actively dismantling the old one to build it, and I was the lumber. The breaking point came on a Sunday, a cold, gray Sunday that felt like the world had forgotten how to be bright. I was trying to sort through the mountain of paperwork, the bills, the threats, the figures that wouldn't add up. My head was pounding. Desperation had become a sour taste in my mouth. I needed to find the original savings account documents. Maybe there was some clause, some forgotten detail I could use to prove the money I'd given him was meant to cover all wedding expenses. It was a pathetic hope, but it was all I had. I kept important papers in a fireproof lockbox on the top shelf of my bedroom closet. I dragged a chair over, my bones aching with a fatigue that had nothing to do with sleep. The box was heavy. I carried it to the bed, the metal cold against my fingers. Inside were the relics of a life: Michael's death certificate, the deed to the house, my own will, leaving everything to Dominic, of course. Dominic's birth certificate, his social security card, yellowing report cards. I sifted through them, the paper smelling of time and dust. And then I found the folder. It was unlabeled, a simple manila one tucked at the back. I didn't remember it. I opened it. Inside were financial statements, not mine, statements for an account in Dominic's name with a bank I didn't recognize. The most recent one was just a month ago. I frowned, scanning the numbers. The balance was substantial, over $40,000. My breath caught. Where had this come from? He had a good job, but not this good, not enough to save this much so quickly after college, after wedding expenses. Then I saw the transaction history, and my world stopped. There were regular deposits, large ones, $5,000, $7,500, stretching back over a year. And next to each deposit was a memo, a single word. My hands started to shake. I shuffled back through the older statements, my heart hammering against my ribs. The deposits went back further, 18 months, to just after the engagement. I scrambled off the bed, my legs weak, and went to my old desk in the corner. I booted up the ancient computer, the fan whirring loudly. With clumsy fingers, I logged into my own banking portal. I pulled up my transaction history for the same time period, and I matched them. Every time I'd paid for something for the wedding, the initial $15,000 transfer, the check for his tuxedo, the money for the marriage license fee, even the $200 I'd sent him for miscellaneous expenses, there was a corresponding deposit into his private account a few days later. Always for more. I'd given him $15,000. His reimbursement deposits totaled over $45,000. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the desk. It wasn't possible. It didn't make sense. Then I saw the source of the deposits. Not a person, a company, Sterling Holdings, LLC. Bridget's family. A cold, clear understanding washed over me, leaving me numb. I pictured it. Dominic would come to me with his boyish, worried face. "Mom, the florist needs a deposit. Mom, the band is asking for half up front. Bridget's really stressed about the cost." And I, wanting to ease his burden, wanting to prove I was supportive, would scrape together what I could and send it. And then he would go to Bridget or to her parents. "My mom contributed this much," he'd say, showing them the proof of my paltry payment. And they, perhaps pleased at my effort, or more likely following some cold protocol of shared expense, would reimburse me. But they wouldn't reimburse the modest amount I actually paid. They would deposit a larger, rounder, more generous figure into his private account, a bonus for being their son-in-law, a reward for managing his side of the ledger. My son wasn't just allowing me to be burdened. He was profiting from it. He was using my love and my limited means as a bargaining chip to extract more money from his wealthy in-laws and then pocketing the difference. The betrayal was no longer just emotional. It was financial. It was calculated. It was a scam, and I was the mark. My poverty was his opportunity. My desire to help was his currency. I thought of all the times he'd sounded stressed about money on the phone, the subtle guilt, "I just want to give Bridget the day she deserves, but it's so expensive." It had all been a performance, a script to open my wallet so he could use the receipt to open a bigger one elsewhere. I closed the computer. I carefully placed the bank statements back in the folder and the folder back in the box. I put the box back on the shelf. My movements were precise, robotic. I walked into the living room and sat down in Michael's armchair. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. A strange, quiet stillness settled over me. The pain was still there, the hollowness, but it was now encased in something hard and sharp, clarity. All this time, I had been fighting the wrong battle. I'd been trying to survive the consequences of his actions, the bills, the humiliation. I'd been reacting. But the real war wasn't about paying invoices. It was about value, my value. In his eyes, I had none, not as a mother, not as a person. I was a tool, a prop, a line item. And as I sat in the gathering dark of that Sunday afternoon, a fundamental truth reframed itself in my mind. The power was not in his hands because he was my son. The power was in my hands because it was my life. He had the leverage of my love, but I had the leverage of everything else, my home, my will, my future, the very things he seemed to assume were his by right or were simply obstacles to his new life. The vice of pressure was still there, but I was no longer just the thing being squeezed. I was also the hand on the screw. And for the first time since the wedding, I realized I could choose to let go, or I could choose to turn it the other way. The clarity didn't bring peace, but it brought purpose. The frantic, drowning feeling was gone, replaced by a cold, focused resolve. I was no longer Ellen, the heartbroken mother. I was Ellen, the problem that needed solving. And for the first time in decades, I was going to be my own solution. I started on Monday morning. I called in sick to work, a rare thing for me, and I made a pot of strong coffee. I sat at the kitchen table with a fresh legal pad and a pen. At the top of the page, I wrote, "What is mine?" I made a list. 1. The house. Paid off in my name only. 2. My 401k, modest, but mine. 3. My personal savings, now decimated. 4. My car. 5. My name, my credit. Then, on another page, I wrote what he wants/assumes is his. 1. The house, eventually. 2. Any inheritance. 3. My financial support, indefinitely. 4. My compliance. The two lists stared back at me, a stark map of the conflict. He was acting from the second list. I needed to act from the first. My first move was not against him, but for myself. I picked up the phone and called the collections agency. My voice was calm, steady, the voice I used with distressed patients' families. "This is Ellen Miller regarding account number 48772. I am disputing this debt in its entirety. I did not sign these contracts. I will be sending a formal letter of dispute via certified mail today. Any further communication must be in writing until this is resolved. Thank you." I hung up before the stunned representative could argue. I drafted the letter, citing consumer protection laws I'd looked up online. I drove to the post office and sent it, certified. It was a holding action, not a solution, but it stopped the immediate bleeding. Next, I called a lawyer, not a family lawyer, but a consumer debt attorney. Her name was Sarah Jensen, and she had a no-nonsense voice. I explained the situation, the forged contracts, the financial abuse. I emailed her the statements, the side-by-side proof of my payments and his secret deposits. She said, "This is fraud and financial elder abuse given your age, though that's harder to prove. We can send a cease and desist to the vendors, copy your son, stating you are not responsible. It will likely ruin his credit, not yours, when they come after him for payment. And we can file a police report for the forgeries. That would be a criminal matter." I sat with that for a moment. A police report against my son. The word criminal echoed in the quiet kitchen. "Let's start with a cease and desist," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Send it to the vendors and to Dominic, please." "He's not going to be happy," she warned. "I know." The next step was bigger, scarier. I had an appointment with a financial advisor, someone recommended by Clara from the hospital. His name was David, and his office was warm and quiet. I need to secure my future, I told him, as if I have no one to rely on but myself. We went through everything. He was gentle, but blunt. Your house is your biggest asset, but it's also a drain. Taxes, maintenance, insurance. Your retirement savings are insufficient for a long retirement, especially with possible healthcare costs. I already knew this, but hearing it from a professional made it real. The safe, if threadbare life I'd built was not actually safe. You have options, David said. A reverse mortgage could provide income, but it complicates inheritance. Selling and downsizing is the cleanest financial decision. You could free up significant capital, invest it, and live comfortably in a smaller place. Selling the house, leading the home where Michael had died, where Dominic had taken his first steps. The very thought felt like a betrayal. But then I thought of Dominic's casual suggestion of a second mortgage. He saw it only as a piggy bank for his needs. He didn't see it as my home. He saw it as an asset. Maybe I needed to start seeing it that way too, for my sake, not his. Let's explore what selling would look like, I said, the words tasting like ashes. The most important visit was to my estate attorney, an elderly man named Mr. Garrison, who had done my will after Michael died. His office smelled of leather and old paper. I need to change my will, I said, laying my hands flat on his desk to keep them from shaking. He pulled up the document. Ah, yes, everything to Dominic, with a trust structure if he's 135. He's past that now, so it would go directly to him upon your passing. I want to remove him. The words hung in the air, final and terrible. Mr. Garrison took off his glasses. Ellen, that's a significant decision. May I ask why? I didn't tell him the whole story. I just said, the relationship has broken down, irreparably. I need to ensure my assets are used to secure my own care in my later years and then be directed somewhere meaningful. He nodded slowly, a deep sadness in his eyes. He'd seen this before. You have a few options. You can leave it to another relative, a friend, a charity, or you can set up a testamentary trust that would pay for your final expenses and then dissolve to a charity of your choice, cutting out any individual heir entirely. A charity, I repeated. An idea was forming, fragile but bright. What about a charity that helps single parents, or one that provides financial literacy? We can certainly do that, he said, but you should know if you disinherit him, he may contest the will. He'd likely lose, given his age and capacity, but it could create a legal hassle for your executor. What if I began, thinking out loud, what if I use them to take care of myself while I'm alive? Mr. Garrison smiled faintly. That is the most ironclad estate plan of all. You can't contest a will if there's nothing to inherit. That settled it. The plan crystallized in my mind, not as a vengeful strike, but as a dignified strategic retreat to higher ground. I left his office with a list of tasks. 1. List the house with a realtor. 2. Meet with a senior living advisor to find a small, secure apartment or community. 3. Redirect my retirement contributions to be more aggressive. 4. Have Sarah Jensen send the cease and desist letters. I executed each step with quiet efficiency. It was strange. The grief was still a stone in my chest, but it was no longer paralyzing. It had become a weight I carried while I worked. I met with a kindly realtor named Barbara, who didn't ask prying questions about why a widow was suddenly selling her long-time home. I toured 2 tidy, quiet apartment complexes near the hospital, places with no stairs, good security, and other people my age. I was building a new life, a smaller one, a solo one, but it would be mine, controlled by me, designed for my security and peace. Every step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself he had tried to erase. I didn't block Dominic's number. I wanted to see what he would do. The calls came less frequently now, turning from demands to confused inquiries. Mom, the florist just called me really upset about some letter from a lawyer. I didn't answer. Let him wonder. Let him sit with the growing silence. The final piece of the plan came from an unexpected place. While cleaning out the attic to prepare the house for sale, I found my grandfather's old tackle box. In the bottom, under rusty lures, was a small velvet pouch. Inside was my mother's engagement ring, a simple, lovely sapphire flanked by 2 tiny diamonds. I'd forgotten all about it. It wasn't worth a fortune, but it was beautiful. It was also something Bridget would never have seen, never have catalogued. I took it to a jeweler and had it appraised. Its value was modest but meaningful. I didn't sell it. Instead, I put it in my safety deposit box. It was a tangible piece of my lineage, my story. It was not for him. It would be for me, but for someone in the future who would value it for what it was, not for what it could be traded for. And my plan was not about confrontation. It was about evaporation. I was making myself and everything I had disappear from the board on which he was playing. He could have his new life with Bridget. He could have his secret bank account, but he would not have my home, my security, or my future. He would have nothing of me left to spend. The letter from Sarah Jensen's office did its work. The vendor stopped calling. The ominous envelope ceased to appear in my mailbox. The financial siege was lifted. In its place settled a new, profound silence from my son. For 3 weeks there was nothing. No calls, no texts. It was as if I had finally done what he'd wanted all along. I had vanished. Then, on a bright Tuesday afternoon, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole I saw him, Dominic, alone. He looked older, tired. His shoulders were slumped. There was no sign of Bridget. For a long moment I considered not answering. The new, quiet life I was building behind this door felt fragile. He was a gust of wind that could shatter it. But I had to face him. This was the final piece of business. I opened the door. The sunlight fell between us, a bright, indifferent bar. "Mom?" His voice was hoarse. "Dominic?" I didn't step back to let him in. I stood in the doorway. "Can I come in? We need to talk." I hesitated, then nodded, moving aside. He walked into the living room, his eyes darting around as if seeing it for the first time. They landed on the "For Sale" sign leaning against the wall, waiting to be planted in the yard. He stopped dead. "You're selling the house?" He turned to me, shock etched on his face. This clearly was not what he had come to discuss. "Yes." "Why? Where will you go?" "That's my business." My voice was calm, neutral. The nurse's voice. He ran a hand over his face, struggling to regroup. "Look, Mom, about these letters from the lawyer? What is this? Why would you do that? The vendors are all calling me. They're threatening to sue me." "They should." I said simply, "You signed the contracts." His composure cracked. "I did it for us, for the wedding. You were supposed to help." "I did help. I gave you every penny I had. And you—" I paused, letting the cool, clean truth hang in the air. "You deposited it and then asked for more from Bridget's parents. You made a profit, Dominic, off of me." All the color drained from his face. His mouth opened, then closed. The secret was out. He hadn't known I knew. He had thought he was so clever that his mother in her quiet, tired world would never figure it out. It wasn't like that," he stammered. "They wanted to contribute. It was easier to just streamline it. It was fraud," I said, the word blunt and heavy. "And financial exploitation. My lawyer used those words." His shock turned to anger, a defensive flushing rage. "So you got a lawyer to attack your own son after everything I'm going through?" "What are you going through, Dominic?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Bridget left," he burst out, the words tearing from him. "She's filing for divorce. She said I wasn't established as she thought, that there were complications with my family." He spat the last word, his eyes accusing me. "This is your fault. If you had just been supportive, if you had just paid the bills and been nice to her, none of this would have happened." There it was, the core of his truth. I was the variable that had ruined his equation. Not his deception, not his greed, not his new wife's mercenary heart. My failure to be a sufficiently funded and sufficiently invisible prop. I didn't get angry. The clarity I'd found was armor. She left because the money from my house didn't materialize. She left because you couldn't deliver the assets you promised. That's not my fault. That's between you and her. He stared at me, breathing heavily, looking for a moment like the little boy in a tantrum. Then his expression shifted, shifting into something pleading, manipulative. "Mom, please, I'm sorry, okay? I'm so sorry. I was stressed. I was trying to make her happy. You know how it is." He took a step toward me. "We can fix this. Don't sell the house. I can move back in for a while, help out, get back on my feet. It'll be like old times." The offer was so breathtakingly transparent it was almost impressive. He had nowhere to go. The divorce would be costly. His secret stash was probably already spent or tied up. And here was the old family home, paid for, waiting, a soft landing pad. He could regroup here, and in a few years it would be his anyway. He was trying to revert to the old map, where I was the safe harbor and he was the returning voyageur. He saw me hesitate, not out of consideration, but out of sheer disbelief, and pressed his advantage. He gestured around the room. "Dad would have wanted us to stick together. This is our home. We can't just let it go." That was his mistake, invoking Michael, invoking the past he was so willing to sell for parts. "Sit down, Dominic," I said. He sat on the edge of the sofa, a spark of hope in his eyes. I remained standing. I walked to the bookshelf and pulled out the folder I had copied at the lawyer's office. I laid it on the coffee table in front of him. "This is a copy of my new will. I've revoked the old one. You are no longer my heir." His hope shattered, replaced by stunned horror. You can't." "This," I continued, placing another document next to it, "is the listing agreement with the realtor. The house goes on the market next week. The proceeds will fund a retirement account and a new, smaller home for me." "This is insane," he shouted, jumping up. "You're cutting me out over a fight? Over some stupid bills?" "No," I said, my voice finally rising, but not in a shout, in a clear, carrying tone that silenced him. "I am protecting myself from being used until I have nothing left. I am ending the cycle where my love for you is an open checkbook and my life is an inconvenience to your plans. You kicked me out of your wedding, you forged my name, you made money off of my sacrifice. You see this house, my security, as a fallback plan for your failed marriage. There is no over here. This is the relationship now, and I am choosing to end it." He was shaking his head, tears of fury and self-pity in his eyes. "You're a bitter, lonely old woman, and you're gonna die alone in some crappy apartment, and you'll regret this." The cruelty of it should have leveled me, but it didn't. It was just more data, confirmation. Maybe I will, but it will be my choice, my life, my regret, not yours to manage or profit from. I walked to the front door and opened it. The bright afternoon poured in. "You need to leave now." He didn't move. He looked from me to the documents on the table, to the for sale sign, his future dissolving before his eyes. "You're really doing this?" he whispered, the fight finally dawn, leaving only a hollow realization. "I really am." He walked past me, out onto the porch. He turned, his face a mask of bewildered loss. Not loss of me, I understood then, but loss of what I represented, safety, leverage, a plan B. "Goodbye, Dominic," I said. He had nothing left to say. He walked down the path to his car, a sleek model that suddenly looked like a liability. He didn't look back. I closed the door. The lock clicked with a soft, final sound. I leaned against the wood, listening to the sound of his engine starting, the tires on the pavement fading away. It was done. The confrontation had not been a dramatic showdown. It was a quiet, surgical severing. There was no victory in it, only a profound and necessary loss. I had not defeated my son. I had simply, finally, stopped playing the game he had invented. The house was very quiet. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. They looked like tiny floating stars. I looked around at the walls that held all my memories, good and bad. I was letting them go. But for the first time in a long time, I was not afraid of what came next. The house sold faster than I'd anticipated, a young couple with a baby on the way. They loved the big backyard, the sturdy bones of the place. The woman was a teacher, the man a carpenter. When they walked through, they didn't see an outdated kitchen or worn carpets. They saw a future. They saw home. It was painful and healing to watch. The closing was a quiet affair in a title company office. I signed my name a dozen times. When the final paper was stamped, a weight I hadn't fully acknowledged lifted from my shoulders. The anchor was gone, but so was the chain. With the proceeds, I did exactly what I'd planned. I bought a small, sunny condo in a secure building 10 minutes from the hospital. It had 2 bedrooms, one for me, one for a future guest or a craft room. It was new, with no memories in the walls. I could make my own. I invested the rest with David's guidance. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to live without constant fear, enough to afford a nice vacation once a year, enough to be generous with myself for once. I kept working, but I dropped to part-time, 3 shifts a week, enough to stay connected, to feel useful, but not so much that I came home exhausted. I started gardening again, with pots on my balcony, tomatoes, herbs, flowers that attracted hummingbirds. I joined a book club at the local library. The women were kind. Their conversations about plots and characters, a lovely shallow pool I could wade in. I heard about Dominic through the grapevine of old neighbors. He'd moved into an apartment. The divorce was finalized quickly, cleanly, and from what they'd heard, not in his financial favor. He changed jobs. He was quiet. He didn't come around our old street. The grief for him, for the son I'd known and loved, became a quiet companion. It didn't cripple me anymore. It was just there, like the weather. Some days were sunny and I barely thought of him. Some days were gray and the loss felt fresh. I allowed myself to feel it. I had loved him fiercely. That love was real. Its absence now was a real wound, and I stopped trying to pretend it wasn't. A year after I moved into the condo, a letter arrived. It was in his handwriting. My heart thumped once, hard against my ribs. I carried it to my balcony, sat in the morning sun with a cup of tea, and opened it. It was not long. It was not full of elaborate excuses or grand pleas. Mom, I've been in therapy for 6 months. My therapist says I need to take responsibility, so here it is. I was wrong. About everything. The wedding, the money, the way I treated you. I was selfish and greedy, and I let someone else's values replace my own. I used you. I lied to you. I'm so profoundly sorry for the pain I caused. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything from you. I just needed you to know that I see it now. I see what I did, and I am ashamed. I hope you are happy and well. Dominic. I read it 3 times. The words were simple. They felt true. There was no ask in them, no manipulation, just an acknowledgement. It was the first thing he'd given me in years that came with no price tag. I cried then. Not the harsh, desperate sobs of before, but a quiet, releasing flow of tears. They were for the boy he'd been, for the man he'd become, for the relationship we'd lost. They were also, strangely, for me, for the mother who had tried so hard, and for the woman who finally said, enough. I did not write back, not then. A response felt like reopening a door I'd worked so hard to close and lock. But I didn't throw the letter away. I put it in the small wooden box on my dresser, next to my mother's sapphire ring. Another 6 months passed. Spring came again. On a whim, I signed up for a weekend workshop on nature photography, something I'd always been curious about. It was held at a state park. As I was setting up my tripod by a misty creek, trying to remember the instructor's advice on aperture, I saw him. He was alone, sitting on a bench on the other side of the water, just looking at the trees. He didn't see me. My first instinct was to pack up and leave, to protect my peace. But my peace felt sturdy now. It didn't feel so easily shattered. I watched him for a minute. He wasn't on his phone. He was just being there. I didn't approach him. I went back to my camera, adjusted the lens, and took a picture of the light filtering through the sycamore leaves. It was a good shot. When I packed up an hour later, he was gone. That night, I sat at my small dining table and wrote a letter. It was short. Dominic, I got your letter. Thank you for writing it. I saw you at Silver Creek State Park today. I'm glad you were there. It's a beautiful place. I am well. I hope you are too. Mom. I mailed it the next day. It was not an invitation. It was not a reconciliation. It was an acknowledgement, a thread, gossamer thin, cast across a chasm. I had no expectation of what, if anything, would be built from it. That was no longer my responsibility. My life now is small, and it is mine. It is built on the rubble of what broke, but I have cleared the space and planted a new garden. It is quieter. There are empty chairs at my table on holidays, but there is also music I choose, books I want to read, silence that is not lonely, and a profound, hard-won sense of safety. I learned that love does not mean surrender, that being a mother does not mean a martyr, that the deepest betrayal sometimes comes wrapped in the word family, and the bravest thing you can do is to redefine what that word means for yourself. I learned that sometimes the only way to save the love you have for someone is to let go of the person they've become. The land, the house, the money, they were just a scenery. The real story was about respect. And when that was gone, all that was left was to gather what remained of myself and walk with dignity into a new chapter. The story of a mother and her son is never really over, but its shape can change beyond recognition. And sometimes in that new, unfamiliar shape, you finally find a way to breathe again. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please hit the like button. It tells me these words mattered. Consider subscribing for more stories about finding quiet strength in difficult relationships. Most importantly, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. If you feel comfortable, share what part of this story hit home. Your thoughts and your own stories truly matter to me. Take care of yourselves, and remember, your real legacy is the life you bravely build for yourself.